My name is Tiffany Hayes, and this is my Who Am I presentation for Dr. June Bethea at South Carolina State University in the Cultural Variations graduate class. In this presentation, I am going to examine where I am in terms of my knowledge and understanding of various cultures and discuss some things or experiences I've had growing up that have shaped who I am. So I grew up I was born and raised in a small rural town in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. It was a very small mountain community. Some would even say isolated. Very not a very large population of people. Um, the population is predominantly white. When I was growing up there, it was predominantly white, and we also had a population of Hispanic migrant workers who would come work during the Christmas tree season. Many of the families in this area lived in poverty, which is, I guess you could say, a stereotype of the Appalachian Mountains. Um, Over the years, the area has become more diverse as people have relocated and they discovered our little mountain town and decided they wanted to live there. So, growing up, I grew up in a two-parent household and I had a younger brother. We were a middle class family. My father was an entrepreneur and owned his own business, and my mother worked full time. She still works full time at a financial office. She works for a investment company. Um, Growing up, we attended church regularly, very involved in church activities. My grandfather was actually a Southern Baptist preacher, and mom's always been the Sunday school teacher, dad's the deacon. Uh, it was a huge part of how I grew up and how I was raised. Um, in my small mountain town, we had very few schools. So I attended elementary, middle, and high school with the same group of friends throughout. So I've had friends since I was 5 years old, and we graduated together. During this time of growing up, these are the areas where I gained my knowledge of bias and stereotypes. Um, Much of my knowledge and experiences came from the media perspective, given that we didn't have a very diverse population where I lived. Peripheral situations and my own personal experiences, very much the same. As I grew older, made more friends, and got to experience various cultures that way. And then some organized experiences, those were just beginning. In my adult life, I graduated high school in 2005 and moved away to attend college. I started at community college and then transferred to a university. In 2009, I married and we moved to California. My husband enlisted in the U.S. Navy, and from 2009 to 2013, we lived in Southern California. The last 2 years of that, from 2012 and 2013, we lived in San Diego. We were only a few miles away from the from the border of Mexico, actually. So that was a significant part of my life and kind of a culture shock for me, living in that area. And Spanish was the predominant language in a lot of areas, and the culture, it was heavily influenced by Hispanic culture. Um, but it was a great experience. I really enjoyed my time in California. Um, had children in 2009. I had a son. 2011, I had my daughter. In 2012, I had my last son. In 2019, I graduated from Appalachian State University, and we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and I started working doing ABA therapy. And then in 2022, I started graduate school here at South Carolina State University. My adult experiences, built off of those earlier um, steps of the hierarchy. And this is where I began more of my knowledge of self reflection, more organized experiences, and knowledge of value and respect. Self reflection really began, I would say, when I met and married my husband. I am in an interracial marriage and we have biracial children. So there are differences there culturally in how you raise children, how holidays are celebrated, and the family dynamics. Another thing was my time at Appalachian State. I took a cultural diversity class there, and that certainly broadened my horizons. Um, and then now, still staying in that level of self reflection, but also leaning more into the value and respect, valuing diversity, respecting everyone, and just continuing to read and gain knowledge of all the cultures that we come in contact with. So, cultural competence is a lifelong process, and we should enjoy the journey. As a future SLP, I I do believe that a lot of my experiences that I've had growing up have shaped me into who I am and how I treat people and how I try my best to show respect to everyone. Um, it is a very important. It's very important to me, and it's something that I also work very hard to instill in my own children, um, as I am teaching them by example of how to treat others. Thank you for listening.